Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video, we're going to be talking about the new seasonal affix that just went live on the PTR, Tormented. The estimated release date for the patch is now about 5 weeks. It's about time. So this video is meant as a first impression, not a guide or anything. Although once the numbers get finalized, expect a full-blown guide talking about which powers are best in which situation in the coming months. We don't know all of the exact details yet, but we've done a lot of testing and messing around with the affix to try and learn exactly how it works. So even though that this isn't finalized completely, I think we have a pretty good idea of how it goes. So I'm sure you've read about it by now. The way it works is there's 4 mini bosses, each with their own unique mechanics spread throughout the dungeon. These places are predetermined, and you fight them at the same time whenever you want to fight them. It's not percent based like Prideful. Once you kill one of these bosses, you get a selection of 3 different powers. These powers are role-based or general. There's no spec-specific powers, which a lot of people are hoping for. However, there's also no randomness. Every time you kill the same boss, you get the same selection of powers. Every single time you know the powers that you're going to be offered. Some of the most notable powers are a 20% overall damage Thorns aura for tanks. That's just like absolutely crazy. That's just doing so much damage. For DPS, there's the Volcano proc that's doing 10 to 15% of their damage. And for healers, there's actually a couple interesting ones. There's one that gives your entire party a 30% global movement speed, and another one that gives you seemingly infinite mana for the entire dungeon. I'll maybe clip around and show these in the VOD highlights. I'll also leave a link in the description for the full list of powers. I'm not going to go over everyone just because it's very possible that a lot of these change, but I'll leave it there for you guys to check out. So there you'll see in the back, there's Executioner Varith. This is the first of 4 mini bosses. This is one that gives the volcano power. So although you don't have to worry about the routing for like 20% count or whatever, you do kind of want to hit up as many of these guys as possible as early as possible. For example, this is a really powerful power that you get, so we went to this side of the dungeon as soon as possible just to get this. So a few questions that we have about the affix that we're not totally sure. Does it change weekly, either where the mobs are located or the powers? If I had to guess, I would say that the mobs move throughout the dungeon and maybe rotate in different spots to sort of change up the routes a little bit. Although I don't think the powers are going to rotate weekly. A lot of people who maybe have more information than me seem to think that the powers are going to rotate weekly, so that could be a thing. However, just based off of what I've seen from Blizzard affixes so far, I don't expect a whole batch of new powers or some sort of crazy, switch up from week to week, other than just where the bosses are placed. One thing is that you can't change powers during the key. So once you pick the powers, it looks like you can click on the orb or do something with them, but those powers are basically permanent. And once you pick the powers, you're set in stone, at least for that run. Although, of course, if you go into a different dungeon run, you'll be able to pick new powers. So let's say you don't want to fight these because they might be tough or they don't give count. They empower the last boss with the aura if you decide to skip them. And with the current tuning in the game right now, you may want to skip some of them. So by aura, I mean each one of these mobs, along with their base abilities, also has an aura that makes it harder to fight them. For example, the one that we just fought, I believe, has reduced healing by 50%, that's a tough one to fight the last boss with. But there's a Frost guy who his only aura is to slow you down by 50%. And I see plenty of situations where you'll be able to fight the last boss with a slow aura rather than fighting this guy right here. And I think in high-level keys, at least with the tuning the way that it is right now, skipping them and fighting them with the last boss will absolutely be a strategy. I think it'll be very similar to the Awakened affix in Season 4. In Pugs, you'll probably never skip these, and you'll always fight them just because safety-wise it's worth it. Although, in the highest level, World First runs, where time is a very important issue, if these guys are taking a minute to a minute and a half, and they're maybe tough enough to require some of your DPS cooldowns, I think it'll be a good idea to skip them. Another thing we've noticed is that they don't really social or body pull with other mobs, so you may find situations where they're pretty awkward next to dangerous packs. However, you can simply just tag the pack or tag the mini boss, and both of them will not pull. So that way you can still social them, or rather like body pull them if you move really close, or if you hit them, obviously. However, for the most part, their aggro range is pretty lenient, and you can see we're fighting, you know, pretty close to this guy and nothing happens until we get right up in range of him. So for the most part, I would say the powers are pretty reasonably placed. They're not sort of out of the way, trying to force you to like do weird packs or, you know, go out of the way. Most of the powers are just kind of smack dab. A lot of them are kind of front loaded in the first half of the dungeon just to kind of get you loaded up on the powers. This might be the first affix where it's actually worth it just to fight all the guys. And, you know, it could be a situation where 10s are actually easier than 9s. We kind of saw that with Prideful, even though technically on paper, Prides were still faster if you skip them. However, these guys, with how strong some of these damage procs are, might actually be worth fighting. So you'll see there, this is a healer power that I have. You grant all allies 30% additional movement speed. Looks like I am hungry, so I take the food power. I think this was my very first time. You can see me like testing it and messing around with it to see how my mana works. It essentially works like Fish Feast did, where it is like double or I think it's quadruple the rate of your food. This is a great healer power. There's also another power that gives you a ton of mana as well. I'd imagine for pugs, if you decide that mana might be an issue, let's say you're playing a Mistweaver or a Disc Priest, you may decide to take one of these mana powers. However, a power like 30% movement speed for your allies is going to be really powerful. And in high keys, I don't think you're going to be able to get away with taking the mana powers. Although, what an absolutely awesome quality of life increase this is for pugs, especially for, you know, those classes that struggle with mana a little bit, you know, Mistweaver or Disc Priest. Another thing we found out about these guys, you won't be able to see it in Halls of Atonement, but you can still do the dungeon stuff to them. And by that, I mean the like Covenant specific buffs. So let's say you pull it into the urn of the other side, for example, you can stun the mobs. You can use the orbs or the weapons and Necrotic Wake to kill them. You can pull Plague Borers into them from Plaguefall. And I'm guessing that using the dungeon mechanics on these guys will be a big part of the strategy to kill them, at least, again, in higher level groups where they go very high. So as I mentioned earlier, I think skipping them is probably going to be the move in higher keys, depending on tuning. Although in pugs, it's not really something that you'll have to worry about, especially fighting with the last boss is probably not something you'll ever see in pugs. From what I've seen about the powers, they're not super balanced. I hope that they get a little bit of tuning to give some interesting choices. There'll definitely be some interesting choices that you get in the key, but for example, like when I took the one that increased my food mana gain versus movement speed, like I was essentially completely trolling my team, but I just wanted to try it out and see how it worked. For the most part, there's going to be like a set of powers that's your BIS powers, and I don't really even think it's going to be spec specific. There's going to be a set of BIS healer powers and a set of BIS DPS powers and tank powers, and that's it. However, there is some nice room to mess around a little bit. So for example, let's say it's a Grievous week, for example, you may decide, hey, I do want to take this mana power even though I don't normally do it. Or you may take a defensive power instead of an offensive power if you decide that there's a really tough boss. And so there are situations where you'll take the other powers. I think although it's definitely clear which ones the best ones are, there still are plenty of situations in Mythic Plus, if you think outside of the box, where you do want, you know, a power that might be suboptimal just to get through the harder parts. Overall, I think the most important thing about this affix is it is so chill. Coming from Prideful, especially in pugs, it seems like one small route deviation where you just, you know, someone on your team body pulls something, or maybe your tank didn't fully calculate the route at the beginning. You can essentially just fully deplete your key if you mess up the route. Whereas this is so much more relaxing. You just kind of go through, way less restrictions. A lot of people are worried that the affix is too boring or simple, or that'll get old, but I really don't think it will. I think this will alleviate a lot of pug concerns, and I hope that it encourages people to do more pug keys, because, you know, once you get to that hard 17, 18, 19 level where you need good routes, it kind of feels like there's a lot of tanks that are a little gun shy to play in pugs, and then it's hard to get pug groups started because there's no tanks. So hopefully this will alleviate some problems with tanks, not just with routing, but also defensively. So tanks are going to get beefed up. There's a lot of very interesting powers. For example, one power that gives you damage reduction in the first 3 seconds of the pull, which is a incredibly clever solution to the quote-unquote kiting meta, or the fact that tanks feel a little weak. Give them a bunch of anima powers that they'll be able to use in most dungeons that'll kind of beef them up while they get the tuning and everything figured out. I think this will be a very good affix, and it'll be remembered favorably. I hope that they tune down the powers just a little bit. It's not a big issue if the powers are very overtuned, just because everybody gets them. However, we saw problems in the past where borrowed power or proc based damage becomes too much of your damage. For example, it can feel really bad if another person on your team is just slaughtering you in boss damage or AoE damage in a pull, and then you look at their overall and they're doing 30% of their damage from volcanoes, and it's just like, it feels like a bit more of a lottery than it should be. I know that proc-based stuff can be fun, and in general, proc-based stuff has to be tuned higher than on-demand stuff. Otherwise, you know, why would you use something that's random? However, I think they should maybe go easy a little bit on the powers. This is just the first rendition of the affix, and we don't even know if there's any more powers or if they're going to do any tuning. I think a lot of people are sure that they're going to tune, but you know, you never know. So this is an example of a mob where it's right in the middle of this dangerous pack and it looks scary, but you'll see here from our tank that we can just pull this pack here and it'll run right through the mob. It won't social it. So any situations where you're a bit scared of the, you know, fighting two things together, it's, you know, you don't have to worry about it. You just pull a pack. If anything, this might encourage better play. This is showing people, hey, pull these mobs outside and then fight them on this wall where you can line of sight the Houndmaster, except for, you know, we're not line of sighting the Houndmaster. So anyway, this is my first look and my first impression of the affix. I'll leave a Twitch VOD as well in the description if you want to check out some full key highlights, as well as check out my Twitch stream. I have been streaming live and playing around with the affix and sort of seeing how it works. Been testing Resto Shaman a little bit and Holy Paladin. So thanks for watching. If you're looking for more 9.1 and general WoW Mythic Plus content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I guess I'll add a couple more things real quick, just because I'm sure people are going to ask. So in this key, I'm using the Venthyr Shaman Legendary, the one that applies Riptide and Flame Shock to everyone that you hit with Chain Harvest. In general, I thought it was pretty cool. It was a nice crossover legendary. Most of the problems that I have with the Shaman legendaries is that they're either all healing or all defensive, and you don't really have one that works both ways. You know, let's say you want something that gives you a little bit of DPS, but you don't want something that's absolutely useless for healing. For example, most shamans you see are running the Earthquake Lego, which is great for damage, but it just does nothing for healing if you're ever in trouble or in a harder dungeon. And the Chain Harvest one is a nice crossover. That being said, it feels a little bit weird. It still doesn't really do that much damage or that much healing, and the only synergy I could really think of is, you know, if you were Necrolord, having all those Riptides out is really cool, but obviously you can't use it if you're a Necrolord, so I have mixed feelings about this legendary. I think it's fine. It's, you know, it's reasonably effective. None of the Shaman legendaries right now are that strong anyway, so I definitely think this one will see some use. It increases your damage on 5 target pulls, and it feels really, really good when you get good value out of it, when you can hit 5 targets, also do some healing, throw Riptides everywhere. However, it's a little annoying that it's not very useful on single target, and it's not super useful for healing as well. The other legendary I tried out was the Venthyr Holy Paladin Lego, the one that extends your Ashen Hollow, and then if you walk out of it, it reduces the cooldown. I don't know if I was using this thing wrong, but I thought it was terrible. I really didn't like it at all. Again, maybe there's something that I don't know that other people know, but I've heard a lot of people talking about this. It felt really, really awkward. Like, okay, you either extend your Ashen Hollow, which does nothing because you don't really have wings, right? There's very few situations where you want to extend Ashen Hollow past the duration of wings anyway. Normally you're fishing for an extra wings proc. Or the alternative is you walk out of the Ashen Hollow to get the CD back, but if you walk out of it, you can't get the CD to 2 minutes anymore after the nerf. The CD ends up being more like 3 minutes. And so you end up in a situation where you wings Ashen and then you walk out of it. There you can see me checking everyone's volcanic plume damage. They're 33% on J-Funk. You end up on the situation where you walk out of the Ashen Hollow and then your cooldown of Ashen is longer than your wings. And then you have to decide either like, well, do I just hold my wings for a minute, or do I just send it and then do a bare Ashen? And in general, it felt really, really bad. I think this is a super situational legendary where if you need your Ashens to line up for certain pulls that you can't otherwise get it, or in raid fights, for example, too, let's say there's really hard damage moments every 3 minutes, like a 9-minute fight where you need to get all those Ashens in, it could be good. But for the most part, I actually didn't really like this Lego, and I assume people are going to be playing the Mad Paragon Legendary if they're still playing Venthyr H Paladin in 9-1. So again, little rant at the end, but I just remembered that a lot of people had questions about the new Legos, so I wanted to throw those out there. Thanks for watching. If you are enjoying the content, let me know what you want me to hear next about 9-1. I'm thinking about going over some of my thoughts on the healers as to what I think is going to be good in 9-1, although there hasn't been a whole lot of changes posted, so I'm not really sure. I'm a little bit hesitant on putting it out because it's like, well, they might do, like, they basically did almost nothing to Druid, they did almost nothing to the Priest classes, so I'm not sure if they're, they think they're fine, or they're gonna, there's gonna be a big patch. But either way, have a good one, and happy keying.